A moment of cruelty at a high society party leads to the discovery of a hidden inheritance letter that changes everything. Within legal offices and luxury penthouses, documents emerge that challenge the very foundation of a family's wealth. Between mockery and justice lies a truth that proves care comes in many forms. As the letter's contents spread, true worth reveals itself. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The Beaumont ballroom shimmered, a suffocating opulence of crystal chandeliers and hushed whispers. Isabel, in a simple borrowed gown, felt the weight of every eye, each a tiny pinprick of judgment. Aunt Vivian, a vision in emerald silk, swept past, her laughter brittle as ice. "Darling Isabel," Vivian purred, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "You look quaint." The subtle mockery hung in the air, heavier than the scent of lilies. Isabel's cheeks flushed, a burning shame rising in her throat. The sting wasn't new. It was the familiar weight of years of being overlooked, undervalued. Tears pricked her eyes, a silent rebellion against the years of subtle cruelty. She retreated to a shadowed corner, the glittering spectacle blurring into a painful tableau. The humiliation gnawed at her, a bitter taste, fueling a nascent anger she'd never dared to express. This wasn't just about a party. It was about a lifetime of neglect, a lifetime of feeling unseen. Tonight, however, felt different. Tonight, something shifted. A quiet defiance began to bloom in her heart, fragile but persistent. A tiny seed of rebellion planted in the fertile ground of her long-simmering resentment. The discarded silk scarf, a discarded emerald green, lay on the marble floor, a vibrant splash of color against the cold stone. Isabel hesitated, then knelt, her fingers tracing the delicate embroidery. A crumpled edge caught her eye, a folded piece of paper, tucked within the fabric's folds. Her heart quickened. It was an old letter, the paper brittle with age, the ink faded but legible. The elegant script spoke of a hidden inheritance, a clandestine affair, a name whispered, Eleanor Beaumont, a name absent from the family tree, a ghost in their gilded cage. The letter, a scandalous secret buried beneath layers of family pride, felt like a lifeline. This wasn't just about humiliation. It was about a hidden history, a potential injustice. Back in her small, sparsely furnished room, the letter lay open under the weak glow of her desk lamp. The scent of old paper and ink filled her senses, mingling with the faint aroma of lavender from her grandmother's old sachet. Isabel traced the elegant cursive, her breath catching in her throat. Each word was a revelation, peeling back the layers of the Beaumont family's meticulously crafted image. A chill snaked down her spine. This wasn't just a family secret. It was a potential weapon against the casual cruelty she'd endured. A knock at her door startled her. It was Mr. Silas, his face etched with concern. "Isabel, I saw you leave the party early. Are you all right?" She looked up, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Mr. Silas?" she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, holding out the letter. I think I've found something important." He took the letter, his brow furrowing as he scanned the faded script. He looked at her, his expression a mixture of surprise and a dawning understanding. This changes everything," he murmured, his voice low. The weight of the revelation hung heavy in the air between them, a shared secret that crackled with unspoken possibilities. The seed of rebellion in her heart blossomed into a fragile flower of hope. The fight for justice, once a distant dream, now felt suddenly within reach. The mahogany desk in Silas's study felt cool beneath Isabel's trembling fingers. The scent of aged leather and pipe tobacco clung to the air, a stark contrast to the cloying sweetness of Vivian's perfume that still lingered in Isabel's memory. Silas, his face etched with concern, watched her closely. The flickering gaslight cast long shadows across the room, highlighting the deep lines around his kind eyes. "It speaks of Eleanor Beaumont," Isabel whispered, her voice barely audible above the ticking grandfather clock in the corner. The letter, held gingerly in her hands, felt fragile, like a butterfly's wing. An illegitimate daughter, disinherited, and a substantial trust fund. Silas adjusted his spectacles, his gaze fixed on the faded script. The fire in the hearth crackled, casting a warm glow on his thoughtful face. This is unexpected. The Beaumonts have always been meticulous about maintaining their image. A hidden heir would shatter everything. Isabel nodded, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. The weight of the secret pressed down on her, a suffocating burden. But the letter, it's fragmented. There are gaps, coded messages. I can't decipher everything. He reached across the desk, his touch gentle as he took the letter. His fingers, gnarled with age, traced the faded ink. We'll need to approach this carefully, Isabel. The Beaumonts are powerful. They won't take this lying down. His voice, though calm, held an undercurrent of steel. A silence settled between them, broken only by the crackling fire and the rhythmic tick-tock of the clock. Isabel felt a surge of vulnerability, the fear of failure washing over her. The opulent world she had always observed from the periphery now felt like a labyrinth, its corridors filled with shadows and deceit. She looked at Silas, her gaze searching. His unwavering presence, a beacon in the storm of her uncertainty, filled her with a fragile hope. I don't know what to do, Mr. Silas, she confessed, her voice trembling. The weight of the secret, the potential consequences, were almost overwhelming. Silas smiled, a gentle, reassuring gesture. We'll figure it out, Isabel. Together. We'll start by investigating the details mentioned here. This Eleanor Beaumont. We'll trace her lineage, find any surviving relatives. And then, he paused, his gaze unwavering. Then we'll see about justice. His words, a promise whispered in the quiet study, ignited a spark of defiance within Isabel. The fear remained, a cold hand gripping her heart. But now, alongside it, a resolute flame of hope began to burn. The following days were a blur of hushed conversations and furtive glances. Isabel, haunted by the letter's cryptic message, found herself adrift in a sea of suspicion. The Beaumont mansion, once a symbol of opulence, now felt like a gilded cage. The scent of lilies, usually so comforting, now clung to her like a shroud, a reminder of Vivian's cruelty. Each echoing footstep in the grand hallway felt like an accusation. Silas's study became her refuge. The warm glow of the fireplace, the comforting weight of old books, the quiet ticking of the grandfather clock. These small details offered solace amidst the storm brewing within her. She spent hours poring over dusty family records, her fingers tracing faded photographs of unfamiliar faces. Eleanor Beaumont's image, captured in a sepia-toned photograph, stared back at her with a haunting familiarity. Isabel felt a kinship with this forgotten woman, a shared experience of neglect and injustice. There's something unsettling about this, Isabel murmured one evening, her voice thick with emotion, as she showed Silas a series of coded entries in a worn ledger. The flickering gaslight cast dancing shadows across the aged paper, highlighting the intricate symbols. Silas leaned closer, his brow furrowed in concentration. It's a cipher of sorts. Complex one, but not impossible to crack. We'll need to consider the context, the time period, the family's known relationships. He paused, his eyes reflecting the firelight. This could be the key to unlocking the entire mystery, Isabel. But be prepared. Uncovering this truth might unleash forces beyond our imagining. A chill snaked down Isabel's spine. The weight of her undertaking felt heavier now, a crushing responsibility. The opulent world of the Beaumonts, with its glittering facade, concealed a darkness far more sinister than she had ever imagined. The fear remained, but now it was intertwined with a growing sense of purpose, a fierce determination to fight for justice, not just for herself, but for Eleanor Beaumont and the forgotten legacy she represented. The journey ahead was fraught with danger, but Isabel, with Silas by her side, felt a flicker of hope ignite within her, a flame that refused to be extinguished. The fight had begun. The scent of old paper and dust clung to the air in Silas's study, a comforting counterpoint to the unsettling chill that had settled in Isabel's bones. The coded ledger lay open on his antique desk, its brittle pages illuminated by the soft glow of a Tiffany lamp. Silas, his brow furrowed in concentration, traced a finger along a particularly intricate symbol. "This," he murmured, his voice low, "appears to be a variation of the Beaufort cipher, used extensively in the late 1800s. Isabel watched him, her heart pounding a restless rhythm against her ribs. The weight of the family secret, the potential for a seismic shift in her life and the lives of others, pressed down on her. Fear, sharp and cold, mingled with a burgeoning sense of purpose. "And what does it say?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the tick-tock of the grandfather clock. Silas looked up, his gaze meeting hers. "It's too early to say for sure, but I suspect it relates to a land deed. A significant one, judging by the annotations. And there are names. Names that don't appear in the official Beaumont lineage." A shiver ran down Isabel's spine. The coded message wasn't just a family secret. It was a potential key to shattering the carefully constructed illusion of the Beaumont family's wealth. A wealth she'd always assumed was rightfully theirs. Now doubt gnawed at her. Was their fortune built on lies? On the suffering of others? What if it proves they stole everything? Isabel's voice trembled, betraying the fear and uncertainty swirling within her. Silas placed a reassuring hand over hers. His touch was warm, grounding, a stark contrast to the icy fear that threatened to consume her. "We'll find out, Isabel. We'll decipher this, and then we'll face whatever truth it reveals. Together." His words, laced with quiet strength and unwavering support, ignited a spark of resolve within her. The fear remained, a persistent shadow, but it was now overshadowed by a burning determination to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The opulent world of the Beaumonts, once alluring, now felt like a battlefield, and Isabel, armed with a cryptic ledger and the unwavering support of a friend, was ready to fight. The journey promised to be perilous, but the possibility of justice, of righting a long-forgotten wrong, fueled her onward. The next morning, sunlight sliced through the gaps in Silas's heavy drapes, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Isabel, however, saw none of it. She sat hunched over a chipped teacup, its lukewarm contents long forgotten. The coded ledger, a physical manifestation of her burgeoning anxieties, lay beside her. Silas's words from the previous night echoed in her mind. "We'll face whatever truth it reveals, together." But facing the truth felt less like a brave stride and more like standing on the precipice of a vast, unknown chasm. Silas entered quietly, the rustle of his tweed jacket a subtle intrusion on the heavy silence. He placed a steaming mug beside her, the fragrant steam momentarily distracting her from the knot of dread tightening in her stomach. "Coffee," he said softly, his voice a gentle counterpoint to the turmoil within her. Isabel managed a weak smile. "Thank you." She took a sip, the warmth a small comfort against the chilling uncertainty. "I've been working on the cipher," Silas said, his voice low. "It's proving complex, but I've managed to break through a few sections." He held out a sheet of paper, his fingers tracing the newly deciphered words. Isabel leaned closer, her breath catching in her throat. The decoded text spoke of a land grant, a vast tract of property, and a name, Beatrice Beaumont, a name absent from the family's meticulously crafted history. "Beatrice?" Isabel whispered, the name foreign yet strangely familiar, resonating with a whisper of forgotten pain. A forgotten aunt? A hidden branch of the family? The implications were staggering. The meticulously crafted illusion of the Beaumont family's wealth began to crumble, revealing a foundation built on deceit and disinheritance. "It seems our suspicions were correct," Silas said, his voice tinged with a somber gravity. "There's a significant portion of the family's fortune that's unaccounted for, and this Beatrice, she seems to have been systematically erased from their history." Isabel felt a surge of anger, a fiery rebellion against the injustices she was uncovering. The casual cruelty of Vivian, the blatant disregard for her feelings, now seemed a calculated tactic, a symptom of a deeper, more insidious malady. The fear was still there, a cold hand gripping her heart, but now it was intertwined with a burning determination. She would uncover the truth, expose the lies, and claim what was rightfully hers, and perhaps rightfully belonging to others long forgotten. The fight had begun. The mahogany desk in Silas's study felt cold beneath Isabel's trembling fingers. The scent of old paper and leather, usually comforting, now felt oppressive. Outside, the London rain hammered against the window panes, mirroring the storm raging inside her. Silas, his tweed jacket a muted contrast to the vibrant chaos of her emotions, watched with quiet concern. "Beatrice?" she repeated, the name a fragile whisper against the drumming rain. The decoded fragment, a single sentence hinting at a vast land grant, felt less like a clue and more like a loaded weapon. Silas pushed a chipped porcelain mug towards her, its warmth a small comfort against the growing chill of fear and uncertainty. "We need to proceed cautiously, Isabel. This is a significant discovery, but also incredibly risky." "Risky?" Isabel echoed, her voice tight with a mixture of apprehension and defiance. Vivian's cruelty wasn't a risk, was it? Ignoring me, humiliating me, that wasn't a risk to her. It was a calculated act. Silas nodded slowly, his gaze penetrating. "The Beaumonts have always operated with a certain ruthlessness. Their wealth hasn't been built on philanthropy, Isabel." The weight of his words settled heavily on her. The opulent parties, the shimmering jewels, the casual disdain, it all felt tainted now, revealed as a facade built on a foundation of lies and forgotten injustices. A bitter taste rose in her throat. The elegant penthouses, once symbols of aspiration, now seemed like gilded cages. "I need to know more," Isabel said, her voice regaining its strength. "About Beatrice, about this land grant, about everything they've hidden." Silas leaned forward, his eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. "I have contacts, old friends in the archives. We can begin piecing together Beatrice's story. But be prepared, Isabel. Uncovering the truth might be more painful than you anticipate." A shiver ran down her spine, a mixture of fear and a strange, exhilarating sense of purpose. The path ahead was uncertain, dangerous even, but she felt a resolute strength welling up within her, fueled by years of suppressed anger and a growing sense of self-worth. The fight, she realized, was not just for a forgotten inheritance. It was for her own dignity, for a truth that had been brutally concealed for far too long. The rain continued its relentless assault on the windows, but inside, in the warm glow of the firelight, a fragile ember of hope began to burn. The chill seeped into Isabel's bones, mirroring the icy dread that gripped her heart. Silas's study, usually a haven of warmth and quiet wisdom, felt suffocating. The rain hammered a relentless rhythm against the leaded panes, each drop a tiny hammer blow against the fragile hope blooming in her chest. She clutched the decoded fragment, the name Beatrice a whispered curse against the silence. "A land grant," she murmured, the words catching in her throat. The implications hung heavy in the air, thick and suffocating like the London fog. It wasn't just money. It was power, legacy, a rewriting of history. Forward, her heart hammering against her ribs. "What is it?" Anya tapped a finger on a complex spreadsheet. "A series of transactions, dated around the time of your great-aunt Beatrice's death. They don't match the official inheritance records. Millions of pounds unaccounted for." A silence fell, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. The ticking seemed to amplify the weight of the revelation. Silas's hand reached across the table, covering Isabel's. His touch was warm, reassuring. "It's more than just a discrepancy, Isabel," he said quietly. "It's a deliberate cover-up." The weight of that statement settled upon Isabel, a crushing realization. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them back, her resolve hardening. This wasn't just about money. It was about justice, about the truth, about Beatrice, the forgotten aunt whose life had been unjustly erased. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice trembling only slightly. Anya's expression was grim. "We expose them. We present this evidence, along with the coded messages from the letter to the court. It won't be easy. Vivian's lawyers will fight tooth and nail, but we have a strong case. She paused, studying Isabel's face. This isn't just about winning, Isabel. It's about making sure the truth is heard. Anya's words resonated deeply, striking a chord beyond the legal battle. It was about reclaiming her own voice, her own worth, in the face of years of silence and dismissal. The fear was still there, a lurking shadow, but it felt smaller now, overshadowed by a burgeoning sense of purpose. The fight was far from over, but Isabel knew, with a certainty that surprised even herself, that she was ready. The mahogany table in Silas's study felt cold beneath Isabel's fingertips. Rain lashed against the tall windows, mirroring the storm brewing inside her. Silas, his face etched with concern, poured her a glass of amber liquid. "Brandy," he murmured. To steady the nerves, she accepted it, the warmth spreading slowly through her chilled hands. "Anya believes we have enough to expose them," Isabel said, her voice barely a whisper, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. The weight of the evidence, the potential fallout, pressed down on her. The fear, a constant companion, tightened its grip. Silas nodded, his gaze intense. "But Vivian won't go down without a fight. She's built her life on this lie." He gestured vaguely around the room, at the rich tapestries, the antique furniture, the very air of effortless wealth. "And she'll claw at it tooth and nail." Isabel shivered, not entirely from the chill in the room. "What if we fail? What if they discredit me?" The thought hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The doubt, once a tiny seed, had grown into a thorny vine, threatening to choke the hope within her. Silas's hand covered hers, his touch surprisingly strong. "You won't fail, Isabel. You have the truth on your side. And you have courage I haven't seen in many people." His eyes held hers, full of unwavering support, a beacon in the gathering darkness. "Remember Beatrice. Remember the injustice she suffered. Fight for her, Isabel. Fight for yourself." His words, simple yet profound, struck a chord within her. The image of her forgotten great-aunt, a woman erased from history, fueled a new fire within her, pushing back the suffocating fear. A quiet determination, born of grief and fueled by justice, began to bloom. The brandy warmed not only her hands, but her spirit. She took a deep breath, the scent of oak and spice filling her lungs. "I will," she vowed, her voice stronger now, firmer. The storm outside raged on, but within Isabel, a quiet calm settled, a calm born of resolve. The fight was far from over, but she was ready. The brittle parchment felt like a whisper against Isabel's fingertips. The faded ink of the lost will, discovered tucked within a hidden compartment of an antique music box, detailed a shocking redistribution of Beaumont assets. It wasn't just about money. It was about a life unjustly erased, a branch of the family systematically forgotten. A wave of nausea washed over her. The weight of the revelation felt crushing. Silas found her later, slumped in her chair, the document lying discarded on the worn Persian rug. The firelight danced across his concerned face, reflecting in the pools of exhaustion in her eyes. The scent of old books and pipe tobacco hung heavy in the air, a familiar comfort in the swirling chaos of her life. "Isabel?" His voice was soft, hesitant. She looked up, her gaze unfocused. The fire crackled, spitting embers that mirrored the burning questions in her heart. It's worse than I imagined," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. The chill in the room seemed to deepen, clinging to her like a shroud. He knelt beside her, his hand gently covering hers. The touch was grounding, a familiar anchor in the turbulent sea of her emotions. "Tell me." She pushed the will towards him, the brittle paper trembling slightly. He read, his brow furrowing with each passing line. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the rhythmic ticking of an antique grandfather clock in the hall, each tick a hammer blow against the fragile structure of Isabel's composure. When he finished, he remained silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the document. Then, slowly, he looked at her, his expression a mixture of anger and sorrow. This changes everything. His voice resonated with a depth of feeling that sent a shiver down her spine. "It proves they lied," she said, her voice gaining strength. The fear still lingered, a shadow at the edge of her awareness. But the burning injustice fueled a new fire within her. All of it, the stories, the excuses, everything. He nodded grimly, his gaze hardening. Vivian's cruelty, it stemmed from this, from fear, from guilt. He stood, his movements sharp and purposeful. "We have to act, Isabel. We have to show them." His words were a promise, a battle cry, a testament to the unwavering support that had become her lifeline. The storm outside had subsided, but within her, a storm of determination was brewing, powerful and unstoppable. The fight had become personal, profoundly so, and she was ready. The mahogany desk felt cold beneath Isabel's trembling hands. The lost will, crisp and brittle, lay before her, a testament to decades of deceit. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of afternoon sunlight slicing through the lawyer's office, illuminating the stark injustice etched into the faded ink. Silas, seated beside her, reached across the expanse of polished wood, his hand covering hers. The warmth of his touch was a fragile anchor in the tempest of her emotions. It's unforgivable," Isabel whispered, her voice catching in her throat. The weight of the revelation pressed down on her, a physical burden. The scent of old paper and leather mingled with the faint aroma of coffee from the nearby thermos, a jarring contrast to the bitter taste of betrayal filling her mouth. Silas's gaze remained fixed on the document, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the rhythmic tick-tock of a nearby clock, each second a hammer blow against Isabel's composure. The ornate clock, a relic of a bygone era, seemed to mock the relentless march of time stolen from the forgotten branch of the family. Finally, Silas spoke, his voice low and steady, a counterpoint to the turmoil within Isabel. "This isn't just about money, Isabel. This is about justice, about righting a profound wrong." Isabel looked up, meeting his steady gaze. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the already faded script of the will. She swallowed, trying to compose herself, the tremor in her hands betraying her efforts. They erased them from history, as if they never existed. Silas nodded, his jaw tight with anger. He stood, his movements purposeful, a stark contrast to Isabel's fragility. "This will be a fight, Isabel. A hard fight, but we will fight." His voice resonated with steely determination, a promise whispered against the encroaching shadows of doubt. He moved towards the window, the fading sunlight casting his silhouette against the glass, a figure both formidable and comforting. "We have the truth, Isabel. That's our weapon." His words were a balm to her wounded spirit, a spark of hope in the encroaching darkness. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, Isabel felt a flicker of strength, a resolve born of justice and fueled by the unwavering support of a man who saw her worth beyond the gilded cage of the Beaumont family. The long battle had just begun. The air in Anya Sharma's office hummed with nervous energy. Sunlight, filtered through frosted glass, illuminated dust motes dancing in the stillness. Isabel, perched on the edge of a plush armchair, felt the worn fabric dig into her thighs, a small discomfort in the vast landscape of her anxiety. Anya, sharp and empathetic, leaned back, her gaze steady, assessing. "The evidence is circumstantial, Isabel, but compelling. We have a fight on our hands." Isabel nodded, the weight of the words settling heavily in her chest. The scent of old books and expensive coffee did little to soothe the tremor in her hands. "Vivian's lawyer, Mr. Hawthorne, he's ruthless. I've seen him in action." Anya's lips tightened. "Hawthorne is a shark. He'll exploit every weakness, every doubt. We need to be prepared. We need to anticipate his every move. He'll try to discredit you, to paint you as a greedy opportunist." "But I'm not," Isabel whispered, her voice barely audible above the soft hum of the air conditioning. The injustice stung anew. This isn't about greed. It's about truth, about setting the record straight. Anya reached across the desk, her hand covering Isabel's. I believe you, Isabel, but belief won't win this case. We need airtight arguments, solid evidence. We need to prepare for a brutal battle. The warmth of Anya's touch sparked a flicker of hope within Isabel. Anya's calm strength was a welcome contrast to the whirlwind of emotions swirling within her. She felt a sudden surge of determination. She wouldn't back down. Not now. Not ever. This fight was for her family's lost history, for the dignity of those who had been silenced. This was more than just a legal battle. It was a fight for justice, a fight for the truth, a fight for her own self-worth. The battle lines had been drawn, and Isabel, armed with the support of Anya and Silas, was ready. The mahogany conference table gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights of Hawthorne's office, a stark contrast to the opulent surroundings. Isabel sat opposite Mr. Hawthorne, his tailored suit radiating an aura of cold competence. The scent of expensive leather and polished wood did little to mask the tension crackling in the air. Hawthorne's smile was a predatory thing, thin and devoid of warmth. Miss Beaumont, he began, his voice a silken whisper that belied the steel in his eyes. Your accusations are ambitious. Let's be realistic. The Beaumont family's legacy is built on solid foundations. Your claims are based on flimsy evidence. Whispers in the wind. Isabel felt a familiar wave of nausea rise in her throat. The weight of his words pressed down, threatening to suffocate her. But Anya's hand, a silent reassurance, rested briefly on hers under the table. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. My evidence is not flimsy, Isabel countered, her voice surprisingly steady. It's a testament to a history deliberately obscured, a truth systematically suppressed. She met Hawthorne's gaze, her own eyes blazing with a newfound resolve. The taste of defiance was sharp and exhilarating on her tongue. Hawthorne leaned back, a faint amusement playing on his lips. Sentimentality will not win this case, Miss Beaumont. Only irrefutable facts will prevail. He gestured dismissively towards a pile of documents, meticulously organized, a monument to his meticulous preparation. Isabel felt a chill run down her spine. This was just the beginning. The battle had truly commenced. She glanced at Anya, who offered a subtle nod of encouragement. The fight would be long and arduous, but Isabel knew, deep down, that she wouldn't surrender. The truth, like a stubborn seed, was already taking root. The air in Anya Sharma's office hung thick with the scent of old paper and brewing coffee. Sunlight slanted through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, a silent testament to the hours spent poring over legal documents. Isabel, her face etched with fatigue, nervously tapped a pen against the worn mahogany desk. Anya, her expression a blend of empathy and steely determination, leaned forward. Hawthorne's strategy is clear, she said, her voice low and measured. He'll bury us under paperwork, discredit our evidence through technicalities. Isabel's shoulders slumped. But the will, the letters, they're real. Anya reached across the desk, her hand covering Isabel's. I know, darling, but the legal system isn't always about truth. It's about proof. And Hawthorne's team is exceptionally skilled at obfuscating the truth. The warmth of Anya's touch, however, was a small comfort in the chilling reality of the situation. The weight of the Beaumont family's wealth, their entrenched power, pressed down on Isabel. A sudden surge of anger flared within her. They think they can buy their way out of this. They think they can silence me. Her voice, though barely a whisper, carried the force of a storm. Anya nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. We need a new approach, something that goes beyond the legal loopholes, something that speaks to the heart of the matter. She paused, her gaze intense. We need to expose the cruelty behind their wealth. We need to humanize the story. The words hung in the air, potent and promising. Isabel's gaze shifted, a flicker of hope igniting in her eyes. This was a different kind of battle, a fight waged not just in courtrooms but in the hearts and minds of those who would judge. The fight was far from over, but a new path had been revealed, one paved with compassion and truth. The mahogany conference table felt cold beneath Isabel's trembling hands. Anya, her lawyer, a woman whose sharp intellect was softened by an unexpected well of empathy, offered a warm mug of chamomile tea. The steam, fragrant and calming, did little to soothe the churning anxiety in Isabel's stomach. Outside, the London rain hammered against the window panes, mirroring the storm raging within her. Hawthorne's latest filing. "It's brutal," Anya said, her voice a quiet counterpoint to the relentless downpour. She pushed a thick stack of papers across the desk, each sheet a fresh assault on Isabel's hopes. Isabel glanced at the documents, her breath catching in her throat. Legal jargon blurred into a meaningless tapestry of accusations, each carefully crafted to dismantle her case. The weight of the Beaumont family's wealth, their decades of carefully constructed lies, felt like a physical burden pressing down on her. A tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek. "They're relentless," she whispered, her voice thick with despair. "They'll stop at nothing." Anya's hand covered Isabel's, a silent gesture of comfort. "They underestimated you, Isabel. They underestimated the strength of your resolve and the truth you carry within you." Her gaze was unwavering, a beacon in the encroaching darkness. Isabel looked up, searching Anya's face for reassurance. The lawyer's empathy wasn't a mere professional courtesy. It was genuine, a quiet flame burning against the cynicism of the legal battle. A small spark of hope flickered within Isabel's heart. This fight wasn't just about money. It was about proving her worth, about reclaiming her family history from the clutches of lies and cruelty. "I won't let them win," Isabel declared, her voice regaining its strength, infused with a newfound determination. "I won't let them silence me." The tremor in her voice was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. The rain outside continued its relentless assault, but within Anya's office, a quiet battle for justice was being waged. A battle fought not only with legal documents but with unwavering courage and a profound belief in truth. The scent of chamomile, now mingled with the smell of rain, carried a subtle undertone of hope. The courtroom air hung thick with the scent of old wood and simmering resentment. Isabel, perched on the witness stand, felt the weight of 100 eyes boring into her. Vivian, her aunt, sat a few feet away, a picture of icy composure, her perfectly sculpted lips pressed into a thin, cruel line. The lawyer's questions were like tiny, precise jabs, each one designed to undermine Isabel's credibility. "Ms. Beaumont," Hawthorne, Vivian's lawyer, purred, his voice a silken weapon. "You claim this letter, this alleged inheritance letter, proves a vast conspiracy. Yet it's faded, damaged, barely legible. Is this the evidence upon which you base your entire claim?" Isabel swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. The fluorescent lights seemed to intensify, highlighting the fine lines of worry etched around her eyes. She glanced at Anya, her lawyer, who offered a reassuring smile. Taking a deep breath, Isabel replied, her voice trembling slightly but firm. "The letter itself isn't the only evidence, Mr. Hawthorne. There are other documents, corroborating witnesses." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the courtroom, settling briefly on Silas, who sat in the gallery, his expression a mixture of anxiety and unwavering support. His presence was a quiet anchor in the storm. His silent strength bolstered her courage. Hawthorne pressed on, his questions relentless, designed to sow doubt and expose any perceived weakness in her arguments. Each question felt like a blow, chipping away at her confidence. The air crackled with tension, the silence punctuated only by the rhythmic ticking of the courtroom clock, each tick a hammer blow against Isabel's hope. The emotional toll was immense, a crushing weight on her shoulders. But with every attack, Isabel found a new wellspring of strength, fueled by the injustice she was fighting against. She would not break. She would not be silenced. The truth, she knew, was worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The battle was far from over, but in that moment, surrounded by the weight of the law, Isabel found a quiet resilience, a fierce determination that burned brighter than ever before. The fight was hers, and she would not yield. The courtroom's oppressive silence pressed down on Isabel. Hawthorne's voice, a polished weapon, echoed in the cavernous space, each question a carefully aimed dart. The air, thick with the scent of old paper and nervous sweat, felt suffocating. Isabel's hands, clenched tightly in her lap, trembled beneath the mahogany table. Anya, her lawyer, a calm presence beside her, squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Ms. Beaumont," Hawthorne purred, his eyes glinting with malicious amusement. "Your reliance on a fragmented, barely legible letter is unconventional, to say the least." Isabel swallowed, the dryness in her throat a physical manifestation of her fear. She met his gaze, her own eyes burning with a quiet intensity that belied her trembling hands. "The letter is but one piece of the puzzle, Mr. Hawthorne. There are corroborating documents, witness testimonies." Her voice, though wavering, held a newfound strength, a steely determination that surprised even herself. The tension in the room was palpable, a taut wire stretched to its breaking point. Silas, in the gallery, watched with a mixture of anxiety and pride. His gaze, a silent affirmation of his belief in her, fueled her resolve. She saw Anya's subtle nod of encouragement, a silent pact between allies facing a formidable foe. The relentless questioning continued, each point a calculated attempt to unravel her carefully constructed case. Doubt gnawed at the edges of her confidence, a cold whisper threatening to undermine her strength. Yet, with every attack, Isabel discovered a resilience she never knew she possessed. The weight of the accusations, the crushing pressure of public scrutiny, forged within her a steely resolve. This wasn't just about an inheritance. It was about proving her worth, silencing the years of belittlement and proving Vivian wrong. Anya, sensing Isabel's faltering strength, subtly shifted the line of questioning, focusing on the emotional aspects of the case. This pivot allowed Isabel to speak not just of legal documents, but of the pain, the betrayal, the decades of injustice concealed beneath the Beaumont family's gilded facade. Her voice, filled with a raw emotion, cut through the legal jargon, resonating with a truth that even Hawthorne couldn't entirely ignore. The courtroom clock ticked on, each second a testament to Isabel's unwavering courage, a beacon in the storm of doubt and disbelief. The courtroom's air hung thick with unspoken accusations. Isabel, her throat parched, felt Anya's hand a comforting weight in hers. Hawthorne, Vivian's lawyer, leaned forward, his smile predatory. "So, Ms. Beaumont," he purred, his voice a silken threat, "this hidden letter, you claim it proves a vast conspiracy? Yet, it's faded, torn, practically illegible." Isabel swallowed, the taste of dust and fear coating her tongue. The mahogany table felt cold against her trembling hands. Silas's worried gaze from the gallery was a lifeline, a silent promise of support. "The illegibility is part of the story, Mr. Hawthorne," she countered, her voice surprisingly steady. "It reflects the attempts to bury the truth, to erase a part of our family history." A tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek. Anya subtly shifted tactics. "Mr. Hawthorne," she interjected, her voice crisp and precise, "we are not solely relying on the letter. We have presented supporting evidence, witness statements, financial records, evidence that points to systematic deceit within the Beaumont family." The tension in the room crackled like static electricity. Isabel's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat accompanying Hawthorne's relentless questioning. He pressed on, his attacks focused on undermining her credibility, chipping away at her carefully constructed case. Doubt, a venomous serpent, coiled in her stomach. Yet, as each barbed question landed, Isabel found a wellspring of inner strength, fueled by years of suppressed anger and longing for justice. This wasn't about money. It was about dignity, about reclaiming her rightful place within a family that had consistently rejected her. The clock ticked, each second a battle won, a testament to her resilience, a flicker of defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. Silas's unwavering belief, Anya's strategic brilliance. These were her anchors in the storm. In the corner, Harding's words, sharp and precise like shards of glass, continued their assault. She felt Silas's hand tighten in hers, a silent reassurance in the face of mounting pressure. Ms. Beaumont, Harding's voice dripped with disdain, your entire case rests on the testimony of a woman with a demonstrably biased motive. Her credibility is questionable at best. Isabel met his gaze, her own eyes unwavering. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was overshadowed by a rising tide of righteous anger. "Mr. Harding," she responded, her voice clear and strong, "conveniently ignores the corroborating evidence, the pattern of intimidation, the distroyed documents. These aren't isolated incidents. They are symptoms of a deeper malaise within this family, a systematic silencing of dissenting voices." The judge, a stern-faced woman with eyes that seemed to pierce through the carefully constructed facades in the courtroom, leaned forward. "Ms. Beaumont, can you elaborate?" Isabel took a deep breath, the cool air soothing the burning in her throat. She spoke of the fear that had haunted the family's forgotten branch, the whispers of injustice that echoed through generations. She painted a picture, vivid and raw, of a family fractured by greed and cruelty, a family where truth was a casualty of wealth and power. Her voice, initially trembling, gained strength as she spoke, fueled by a lifetime of suppressed emotions. A hushed silence fell over the courtroom as Isabel spoke of the old photographs, faded and fragile, yet full of unspoken stories, of coded messages whispered between generations, of a love betrayed and a legacy stolen. She spoke of the weight of their silence, the burden of secrets carried for far too long. Silas, watching from the gallery, saw the transformation. The timid, overlooked niece had vanished, replaced by a woman radiating strength and determination. His heart swelled with pride and admiration. This was the woman he had come to love, not just for her kindness and gentle spirit, but for the fierce courage she revealed in the face of adversity. The battle was far from over, but in that moment, Silas knew the tide had begun to turn. The truth, long buried beneath layers of deceit, was finally finding its voice. The courtroom's hushed expectancy felt like a physical weight. Isabel, her throat dry, felt Silas's hand, a comforting pressure against hers. Harding's voice, a polished blade, continued its dissection of her case. The scent of lilies from a nearby arrangement clashed with the metallic tang of fear in the air. Vivian, perched regally in the front row, offered a chillingly serene smile. It was a smile that said, "I win." "Ms. Beaumont," Harding boomed, "your reliance on circumstantial evidence is precarious. Your claims are nothing more than fanciful conjecture." Isabel met his gaze, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. But a new strength bloomed within her, fed by weeks of relentless digging, by the whispered stories of a forgotten past. "Mr. Harding," she countered, her voice surprisingly steady, "conveniently overlooks the emotional context, the deliberate erasure of a family branch, the systematic suppression of truth. That is not conjecture. It's a pattern of behavior." A subtle shift occurred. A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. Even the judge, initially impassive, seemed to lean forward. Isabel's gaze moved to Vivian, whose smile wavered. The carefully constructed facade began to crack, revealing a flicker of something akin to fear beneath the veneer of icy composure. Isabel continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. She spoke of the faded photographs, of the coded messages, not just as pieces of evidence but as fragments of lives lived and silenced. She described the palpable fear she'd sensed in the few remaining members of the disinherited branch, the hushed tones, the averted gazes, the unspoken pain etched on their faces. She painted a vivid picture of a family divided by greed, where love was a commodity traded for power, and loyalty a mere currency in a ruthless game. The courtroom was silent, the only sound the rhythmic tick of the grandfather clock, now a relentless drumbeat accompanying Isabel's revelation. The truth, once buried deep under layers of wealth and deceit, was emerging, slowly, painfully, but undeniably. Silas, watching from the gallery, saw a transformation. The shy, overlooked niece was gone. In her place stood a woman who, with every word, commanded respect and evoked a powerful emotion: empathy. The tide was indeed turning. The unspoken question hung heavy in the air. Could Vivian's carefully constructed world withstand the flood? The courtroom air, thick with anticipation, tasted of stale coffee and simmering resentment. Vivian's perfectly sculpted composure showed the first hairline crack. Her usually flawless lipstick trembled slightly as Isabel's words, sharp and precise as shards of glass, dissected her carefully constructed lies. The lilies, their sweetness cloying, did little to mask the scent of fear emanating from Vivian herself. Isabel's voice, though still trembling slightly, held a newfound strength. "My aunt," she said, her gaze locking with Vivian's, "believes wealth equates to worth. She believes that erasing a part of her family history somehow elevates her own. But I'm here to tell you, the true legacy of the Beaumonts isn't measured in bank accounts, but in the compassion, or the lack thereof, we choose to show." A choked sob escaped from a woman in the back row, one of the forgotten relatives Isabel had contacted. Vivian's perfectly applied mascara began to smudge, a visible testament to the crumbling facade. Her carefully controlled breathing hitched. The judge, his face etched with an unusual weariness, adjusted his spectacles. Silas, watching from the gallery, felt a surge of pride and protectiveness. He saw not just a legal battle, but a battle for Isabel's very soul. She had risen from the shadows of her aunt's cruelty, her spirit forged in the fires of injustice. The shy girl he'd first met was gone, replaced by a woman who radiated quiet dignity. "The letter," Isabel continued, her voice now a low, resonant hum, "wasn't just a document. It was a scream, a silent plea from a family cast aside. And my aunt's cruelty, her deliberate silence, that was the loudest scream of all." Her eyes, shining with unshed tears, moved across the faces of the assembled family, each one a portrait of guilt, denial, or reluctant understanding. The weight of the past, the years of deliberate erasure and carefully crafted deceit, pressed down on the room, a palpable presence almost as heavy as the expectation. The clock ticked on, each second a hammer blow against the foundations of Vivian's carefully constructed world. The truth, once a whisper in the shadows, had finally found its voice. The courtroom hummed, a low thrum of suppressed emotions. Sunlight, slicing through the tall, arched windows, illuminated dust motes dancing in the air, each a tiny, shimmering testament to the passage of time, the weight of secrets. Vivian, her face a mask of carefully controlled fury, stared straight ahead, her knuckles bone-white as she gripped the arms of her chair. Isabel, however, met her gaze. Her eyes, usually soft and hesitant, now held a steely glint. The silence stretched, thick and heavy as the silence before a storm. "You claim I fabricated this," Isabel began, her voice low but clear, carrying across the hushed courtroom. The words hung in the air, each syllable sharp and precise. "That my desire for wealth drove me to this charade. But what of your own desires, Aunt Vivian? What drove you to silence a whole branch of our family? To erase their existence as though they were never more than a stain on your pristine tapestry of wealth?" Vivian's carefully constructed composure finally cracked. A single tear, a glistening pearl against her meticulously applied makeup, traced a path down her cheek. The perfect facade, so long maintained, crumbled under the weight of Isabel's unwavering gaze and the accumulation of unearthed truths. "It was necessary," Vivian whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustle of papers. The words, choked with barely concealed regret, exposed the hollowness beneath her arrogant exterior. The carefully cultivated image of strength faltered. Isabel moved closer, the distance between them shrinking, a symbolic closing of the chasm that years of cruelty had carved between them. "Necessary for whom? For your reputation? For your position? At what cost, Aunt Vivian?" "At the cost of their dignity, their memory, their very existence." Isabel's voice trembled slightly, a testament to the emotional toll the battle had taken. But her eyes remained unwavering, fierce in their determination. The lilies on the judge's bench seemed to wilt under the intensity of the moment. The scent of their perfume, once so sweet, now felt sickly, almost suffocating. The air crackled with unspoken accusations, with years of buried pain finally rising to the surface. The silence that followed was no longer heavy with secrets, but with the weight of undeniable truth, the raw, exposed nerve of a family fractured by greed and neglect. The clock ticked on, a relentless reminder of time lost, of opportunities squandered, of a legacy tarnished by the very people who had inherited it. The confrontation had begun, the unraveling of a carefully woven lie, a tapestry of deceit slowly coming undone, thread by thread. The air in Vivian's penthouse apartment hung thick with the scent of lilies and unspoken accusations. Sunlight, muted by the sheer silk curtains, cast long shadows across the polished marble floor. Vivian, perched on a chaise lounge, appeared almost fragile, the carefully constructed armor of her composure finally showing cracks. Isabel, standing by the panoramic window overlooking the city, felt a strange mixture of triumph and sorrow. The confrontation had been brutal, a raw exposure of wounds long festering beneath the surface of opulent gatherings and forced smiles. "It wasn't about the money," Vivian whispered, her voice barely a breath against the city's muted roar. She ran a trembling hand through her perfectly coiffed silver hair, the gesture betraying the turmoil within. "It was about protecting the family name." Isabel turned, her gaze softening slightly. Protecting it from whom, Aunt Vivian? From the truth. The question hung in the air, unspoken yet powerfully present. The years of neglect, the casual cruelty, the deliberate erasure of a whole branch of their family. It all weighed heavily in the space between them. Vivian's eyes, usually glittering with cold calculation, were now filled with a flicker of something akin to regret. They weren't worthy," she stammered, her voice breaking. The words, frail and inadequate, felt almost pathetic compared to the weight of her actions. Isabel moved closer, the chill of the marble floor a stark contrast to the warmth spreading through her as she saw a crack in Vivian's impenetrable facade. "Worthy of what, Aunt Vivian? Of your acceptance? Your approval? Their lives held value, their love was real. You stole that from them, and in doing so, you stole a part of yourself." A single tear escaped Vivian's eye, tracing a slow, glistening path through the meticulously applied makeup. The sight of her aunt's vulnerability stirred a complex mix of emotions within Isabel: pity, understanding, a faint echo of the forgiveness she desperately sought. But even as empathy tugged at her heart, the memory of her own humiliation remained, a sharp, persistent ache reminding her of the justice yet to be served. I never meant to cause so much pain," Vivian whispered, her voice choked with emotion. The words were a fragile lifeline thrown into the turbulent sea of their fractured relationship. The weight of her actions, the realization of the profound damage she had inflicted, seemed finally to sink in. Isabel offered a small, tentative smile, a gesture not of complete reconciliation, but of a cautious step towards healing. The battle wasn't yet over. There was much work to be done, much to rebuild. But in this moment, amidst the shattered remnants of a carefully constructed lie, a glimmer of hope emerged, the possibility of a future where understanding and compassion could flourish, even amidst the shadows cast by a family's complicated history. The mahogany table in Anya Sharma's office felt cold beneath Isabel's fingertips. Rain lashed against the window panes, mirroring the storm brewing inside her. Anya, her sharp eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight, leaned forward. The witnesses, they're hesitant, fearful of repercussions. Isabel's breath hitched. But their testimonies, they corroborate everything. The lost ledger, the coded messages, they're the missing pieces. The weight of expectation pressed down on her, a leaden cloak. She felt the familiar tremor of self-doubt, a ghost from her past humiliations. "Fear is a powerful weapon, Isabel," Anya murmured, her voice a calming balm. "Vivian's influence, it runs deep, but we have the truth. We have the evidence. Anya's confidence was a lifeline, pulling Isabel from the brink of despair. Anya's words sparked a new resolve. That night, Isabel found Silas in his study, the firelight painting dancing shadows on his lined face. He listened intently as she recounted Anya's concerns, the fear in her witness's eyes a tangible presence in the room. Silas, ever the pragmatist, offered a different approach. Focus on the human element, Isabel. The emotional cost of Vivian's cruelty. Let their stories speak for themselves. His words resonated, striking a chord deep within her. The legal battles had been a relentless assault on her spirit, but Silas's suggestion offered a new path, one that transcended the cold, hard facts of the courtroom and spoke to the very heart of the matter. The ensuing days were a blur of preparation, a careful weaving together of legal evidence and the raw, emotional tapestry of her family's hidden history. Isabel felt a surge of determination, a strength she hadn't known she possessed. The fight wasn't just about an inheritance. It was about justice, about reclaiming a stolen legacy, about healing deep-seated wounds. She was ready. The scent of lilies and old parchment hung heavy in the air as Isabel sat across from Vivian in the opulent drawing room. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscopic patterns on the polished mahogany floor, yet the atmosphere remained frigid. Vivian, her face a mask of icy composure, sipped her tea, the delicate china clinking against the saucer like a tiny death knell. "So, Isabel," Vivian began, her voice a silken whisper that carried a cutting edge. "This crusade of yours, it's quite theatrical, wouldn't you say?" Her eyes, usually sparkling with malice, held a flicker of something else. Fear? Doubt? Isabel met her gaze, her own eyes unwavering. Theatrical? Or simply overdue? She felt a tremor of defiance, a strength born from weeks spent battling not only Vivian's lawyers, but also her own ingrained sense of unworthiness. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, broken only by the ticking of a grandfather clock in the hall. The weight of unspoken accusations, of years of simmering resentment, hung between them, heavier than the antique furniture. Vivian's carefully constructed facade began to crack, revealing the cracks in the carefully laid foundation of her life, visible even to her own self. The carefully cultivated composure began to crumble. A tremor ran through her, a subtle shift in her posture that betrayed the composure she usually maintained. "You think you can win, Isabel?" Vivian finally hissed, the silken voice now laced with venom. "You think you can take what's rightfully mine?" Isabel rose, her chair scraping against the polished floor. The sound was sharp, jarring in the tense silence. She walked closer to Vivian, her movements deliberate, measured. "It's not about mine or yours, Aunt Vivian. It's about justice, about righting a wrong that's been buried for far too long, about a family legacy, built not on lies, but on truth." A tear escaped Vivian's eye, tracing a path down her perfectly made-up cheek. For a moment, the icy mask dropped entirely, revealing a woman broken, vulnerable, and profoundly afraid. The carefully cultivated image of strength crumbled under Isabel's gaze, replaced with a hollow shell of fear. The revelation was not of malice, but of heartbreak and fear of losing all that she'd worked so hard to maintain. The power had shifted not to the side of wealth, but to the side of righteousness. The courtroom hummed, a hive of hushed whispers and rustling papers. Sunlight slanted through the high windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Isabel stood at the podium, the polished wood cool beneath her trembling hands. Her gaze swept across the faces in the gallery. Anya, her lawyer, a beacon of calm amidst the storm. Silas, his expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. And Vivian, her face a mask of carefully controlled fury, her eyes glittering with a mixture of defiance and fear. "For years," Isabel began, her voice initially shaky but gaining strength, "this family has celebrated its wealth, its prestige, while ignoring the truth buried beneath. A truth of betrayal, of disinheritance, of a cruelty so profound it warped generations." She paused, her voice catching slightly as she recalled the faded photographs, the coded messages, the years of carefully constructed lies. My Aunt Vivian, Isabel continued, her voice now firm, unwavering, has built her life on a foundation of deceit. She has wielded her power with a callous disregard for those she deemed unworthy. But I stand here today not just to reclaim what is rightfully mine, but to reclaim the dignity of a family branch unjustly silenced. Her eyes met Vivian's, a silent challenge passing between them. Vivian's meticulously crafted composure fractured. A barely perceptible tremor ran through her, betraying the carefully constructed facade. The expensive silk of her dress seemed to suddenly feel constricting, a physical manifestation of the pressure mounting within her. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, a stark contrast to her usual impeccable posture. The confident glint in her eyes flickered, replaced by a desperate flicker of fear. The judge's gavel fell, a sharp crack that sliced through the charged silence, signaling the start of the closing arguments. The air crackled with anticipation. The weight of the past, the burden of injustice, hung heavy in the air, thick and palpable, a tangible presence in the opulent courtroom. Isabel, her voice resonating with newfound confidence and quiet strength, pressed on. Her words painting a vivid picture of a family history shrouded in secrets and shadowed by pain, a history finally ready to be illuminated by the light of truth. The judge's gavel fell, a sharp crack echoing the tension in Isabel's chest. She watched Vivian, the carefully constructed mask finally cracking. A single tear traced a path down Vivian's perfectly sculpted cheek, a stark contrast to the icy composure she'd maintained throughout the trial. The opulent courtroom, usually a stage for displays of wealth and power, felt suddenly intimate, the silence thick with unspoken emotions. Isabel's voice, though still trembling, held a newfound strength. The letter, she said, her gaze unwavering, wasn't just about money. It was about a family fractured by cruelty, a legacy of pain passed down through generations. It was about a love silenced, a life erased. She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle. Silas squeezed her hand, a silent gesture of unwavering support. Anya, poised and confident, rose to present her closing arguments. Her voice, clear and precise, dissected Vivian's carefully woven lies, exposing the inconsistencies and contradictions. The courtroom buzzed with the energy of a long-held truth finally surfacing. The sunlight, once a symbol of the Beaumonts' privileged life, now felt like a spotlight illuminating the cracks in their facade. Vivian's lawyer, a man whose practiced calm had been a formidable weapon, looked flustered, his carefully constructed arguments crumbling under the weight of irrefutable evidence. He shifted uneasily, his tie loosened, his carefully coiffed hair now slightly disheveled. The confident swagger had been replaced by a nervous fidgeting. Even the air itself seemed to hold its breath, anticipating the verdict. The emotional weight of the years, the weight of the secrets, the weight of the lies, hung heavy in the air. Isabel, looking at Vivian's face, saw not just a formidable opponent, but a woman broken by her own choices, a woman grappling with the consequences of a lifetime of cruelty. The silence stretched, pregnant with expectation, before the judge's final words, a judgment that would shape not only the future of the Beaumont fortune, but also the future of their fractured family. The courtroom hummed, a low thrum of anticipation. Sunlight, slanting through the tall windows, glinted off the polished mahogany of the judge's bench. Isabel, her knuckles white as she gripped the arms of her chair, felt a tremor of fear mixed with a steely resolve. Across the room, Vivian sat rigid, her usual flawless composure a mask barely clinging to her face. The air crackled with unspoken accusations. Anya rose, her voice a calm counterpoint to the turmoil. "The evidence," she stated, her gaze sweeping over the court, "clearly demonstrates a pattern of deliberate exclusion, of systematic manipulation, designed to conceal the truth and maintain an unjust distribution of wealth." She paused, letting the words hang in the air, before continuing, her voice taking on a softer tone. "This case isn't just about a lost will, it's about the human cost of greed and cruelty, about a family torn apart by secrets, Isabel watched as Vivian's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. A flicker of something, fear, regret, crossed her aunt's face. It was a fleeting moment, quickly masked again, but Isabel saw it. The sight stirred a complex mix of emotions within her. Pity, anger, and a growing sense of understanding. The judge leaned forward, his gaze sharp and discerning. "Ms. Beaumont," he addressed Isabel directly, his voice calm but authoritative. "The court awaits your final statement." Isabel stood, the weight of years, of unspoken hurts, settling on her shoulders. She looked at Vivian, at the carefully maintained composure that now felt like a fragile shell. "Aunt Vivian," she began, her voice trembling slightly but unwavering. "I never wanted this. I only wanted to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be loved. This wasn't about the money. It was about restoring a sense of justice, of healing the wounds of the past." Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "It's about acknowledging the truth, however painful it may be." The silence stretched, profound and heavy, broken only by the gentle tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the corner of the room. The courtroom air hung thick with unspoken emotions. Dust motes danced in the sunbeams slicing through the high windows, illuminating the tense faces gathered before the judge. Isabel, her throat tight with unshed tears, felt the weight of generations pressing down on her. Anya's impassioned plea echoed in the silence, a stark contrast to Vivian's icy stillness. Vivian's lawyer, a sleek, predatory figure, shifted in his seat, a flicker of unease betraying his carefully constructed composure. Isabel met Vivian's gaze. The meticulously applied makeup couldn't quite conceal the tremor in her aunt's hand, the subtle clenching of her jaw. For the first time, Isabel saw not just cruelty, but a fragile, terrified woman clinging to a crumbling facade. A wave of empathy washed over her, a bittersweet understanding. This wasn't just about justice, it was about healing. "Ms. Beaumont," the judge's voice cut through the silence. "Your final statement." Isabel took a deep breath, the scent of aged wood and polished leather filling her lungs. She looked at the assembled faces, the weight of expectation heavy. Then, she spoke, her voice clear and strong, yet tinged with vulnerability. "This isn't about money," she began, her words resonating with quiet strength. "It's about a family fractured by secrets and lies, a legacy built on pain and injustice. It's about recognizing the humanity in those we've hurt, and finding the courage to forgive." Her voice faltered slightly, then gained strength. "My Aunt Vivian, her actions were born of fear and insecurity, of a deep-seated need to protect a life she perceived as fragile. But that fear only served to amplify the hurt." A ripple of surprise went through the courtroom. Vivian's rigid posture softened infinitesimally. A single tear traced a path through the perfect line of her makeup. The courtroom held its breath, captivated by the unexpected turn. The silence was profound, the unspoken emotions hanging heavy in the air. A potent blend of sorrow, understanding, and hope. The old clock ticked, each tick a beat of a heart slowly mending. The judge's gavel fell, a sharp crack echoing in the hushed courtroom. Silence descended, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the rhythmic tick-tock of a grandfather clock in the hall. Isabel felt a tremor run through her, a mixture of fear and anticipation. The air, thick with the scent of old paper and nervous sweat, seemed to vibrate with unspoken tension. Anya, her lawyer, squeezed her hand, a silent gesture of support. "The court finds in favor of Ms. Isabel Beaumont, in part." The judge's voice boomed, breaking the suffocating stillness. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Partial victory. Not the sweeping triumph she'd hoped for, but a significant step. Isabel felt a wave of relief wash over her, quickly followed by a complex surge of other emotions. A bittersweet taste lingered on her tongue. Vivian, her face a mask of carefully controlled fury, remained impassive. Yet, Isabel noticed the barely perceptible trembling of her hand, a subtle crack in the icy facade she'd so diligently maintained. Silas, from his seat in the gallery, offered a small, almost imperceptible nod. His eyes, usually twinkling with mirth, were now filled with a quiet pride. The ensuing weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Legal documents were signed, accounts settled, and the long-suppressed truth, slowly, painfully, began to heal the deep wounds within the Beaumont family. Isabel, with Anya's guidance, used her portion of the inheritance not only to secure her own future, but also to help the long-neglected members of her extended family. She established a foundation to support those unjustly marginalized, a testament to the compassion she had discovered within herself. One afternoon, in the quiet solitude of her newly acquired apartment, a far cry from the gilded cage of her aunt's penthouse, Isabel found herself facing Vivian across a small, delicately crafted tea table. The air, thick with the scent of chamomile and regret, was surprisingly calm. I'm sorry, Isabel," Vivian whispered, her voice barely audible above the gentle clinking of porcelain. Her eyes, usually cold and calculating, were now filled with a surprising vulnerability. "I was so afraid." Isabel's heart ached. She saw the terrified child hiding beneath layers of hardened cynicism. "I understand," she replied softly, her voice laced with compassion. "Fear can do terrible things. This wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but a fragile beginning, a recognition of shared humanity, a tentative step towards healing." The journey was far from over, but for the first time, Isabel felt a glimmer of hope piercing through the darkness. The inheritance, she realized, was not just about money, but about the rebuilding of a fractured family, one carefully constructed step at a time. The courtroom buzzed, a hive of hushed whispers and rustling papers. Isabel, perched on the edge of her seat, felt the silk of her dress a stark contrast to the prickly anxiety crawling beneath her skin. The judge's words, though a partial victory, tasted like ash. Anya's reassuring hand squeezed hers, a silent promise of continued support. Outside, the Parisian afternoon sun cast long shadows, a stark reminder of time's relentless march. Vivian, her face a mask of controlled rage, watched Isabel with narrowed eyes. The carefully constructed composure, however, was beginning to crack. A subtle tremor in her hand betrayed the inner turmoil simmering beneath the surface. The years of cruelty, of manipulating her family, the lies she had built her life upon, it all threatened to unravel. Silas, his face etched with concern, met Isabel's gaze from the gallery. His eyes, usually filled with warmth and humor, held a deep well of pride and a hint of sorrow. He knew this was not the total vindication she deserved, but it was a step, a significant one, toward justice. Later, in the quiet sanctuary of Anya's office, the scent of old books and freshly brewed coffee hung in the air. Isabel, exhausted but resolute, traced the faint lines on a legal document. "Partial victory," she murmured, the words heavy with unspoken disappointment. Anya nodded, her gaze understanding and sympathetic. "It's a start, Isabel. Powerful one. You exposed their lies, their cruelty. That alone is a victory." Isabel nodded, a faint smile playing on her lips. The weight of the past remained, but a new confidence was dawning. She had faced the behemoth of the Beaumont legacy and won a significant battle. The future, though uncertain, felt less oppressive, less suffocating than it had only hours ago. The fight wasn't over, not yet, but she was ready, she was stronger, and she was finally free. The courtroom emptied, leaving behind the lingering scent of old wood and tension. Isabel felt the chill of the Parisian evening seep into her bones, a stark contrast to the warmth of Anya's hand still clasped in hers. "Partial victory," Anya repeated softly, her voice a balm against the raw ache in Isabel's heart. The judge's words echoed in her ears, a compromise, a recognition of injustice, but not the complete retribution she craved. "It's not what we hoped for," Isabel whispered, her voice catching. The weight of years of silent suffering, of witnessing Vivian's cruelty, threatened to overwhelm her. Anya squeezed her hand tighter. "But it's a crack in the dam, Isabel. A significant one." Silas found them outside, his face etched with worry. The gallery's hushed atmosphere had amplified his anxiety, but his eyes, when they met hers, held a quiet strength. "You fought like a lioness," he said, his voice low and reassuring. He brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle, conveying more than words ever could. The simple gesture, a silent affirmation of his unwavering support, brought tears to her eyes. The car ride back was silent, punctuated only by the rhythmic thrum of the engine and the city's distant hum. Isabel stared out the window, the Parisian lights blurring into streaks of color. The partial victory felt hollow, a bittersweet taste leaving her emotionally depleted. Anya sensed her despair, reaching out to place a comforting hand on her arm. "We'll appeal," she said firmly, her voice a promise of continued fight. Silas nodded in agreement, his gaze filled with a determination that mirrored her own. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. But tonight, the exhaustion was undeniable. The fight had taken its toll. They needed to rest, to regroup, before the next battle began. The journey towards true justice was far from over, but the first step towards exposing the truth had been taken. A crack had formed in the Beaumonts' carefully constructed facade, and Isabel knew, with a renewed resolve, that she wouldn't rest until the entire structure crumbled. The courtroom buzzed with hushed whispers as the judge's gavel fell, the sound echoing the finality of the decision. Isabel felt a wave of nausea, the crisp air suddenly thick and suffocating. Partial victory. The words hung in the air, heavy and inadequate. She glanced at Anya, her lawyer's face a mask of controlled emotion, yet her hand, squeezing Isabel's, betrayed a shared disappointment. Silas's presence beside her felt like a solid anchor in a turbulent sea. His eyes, usually twinkling with humor, were clouded with concern. "It's something," Isabel managed, her voice barely above a whisper, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. The years of quiet suffering, the silent battles against Vivian's cruelty, threatened to overwhelm her. The weight of expectation, the pressure of the fight, had left her emotionally drained. The Parisian twilight painted the city in shades of bruised purple and deep orange as they walked from the courthouse. The cold air bit at Isabel's cheeks, a stark contrast to the heated courtroom atmosphere. Silas's arm brushed hers, a silent gesture of comfort that spoke volumes. He didn't try to offer false reassurances. His understanding was a silent strength. "We'll appeal," Anya stated firmly, breaking the silence. Her voice, though resolute, held a note of weariness reflecting the grueling battle they'd fought. "This isn't the end, Isabel. We have more to uncover." Isabel nodded, a fragile gesture, but the strength in her eyes mirrored the growing determination in Anya's. The partial victory, though bittersweet, had cracked open the door to further justice. The journey was far from over, but they wouldn't falter. The fight, fueled by a fierce desire for true reconciliation and a fairer distribution of the inheritance, had only just begun. A small seed of hope had been sown, promising a future where the truth, finally acknowledged, would blossom into a new understanding of the Beaumont family and its complex legacy. The Parisian air, crisp and carrying the scent of rain-washed cobblestones, offered little solace. Isabel, Silas, and Anya walked in silence, the city lights blurring into streaks of color through Isabel's tear-filled eyes. The courtroom's sterile atmosphere had given way to the city's vibrant chaos, yet the emotional turmoil remained. Anya, ever practical, broke the silence. "The appeal will take time, Isabel, but we have a solid foundation." Isabel managed a weak smile, the gesture feeling strained, unnatural. The weight of the past, the years of simmering resentment against Vivian, felt heavier than ever. I don't know if I have the strength for another battle, Anya." Her voice trembled, betraying the exhaustion etched on her face. Silas squeezed her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "You have more strength than you know, Isabel, and you're not alone." His gaze, warm and reassuring, met hers, offering a silent promise of unwavering support. The subtle shift in his expression, from concern to a quiet strength, spoke volumes of his enduring belief in her. They reached a small, secluded park, the rustling leaves a calming counterpoint to the city's hum. Isabel sank onto a bench, the cold seeping into her bones mirroring the chill in her heart. The partial victory felt hollow. It was a crack in Vivian's carefully constructed wall. Yes, but not the shattering blow she had hoped for. Anya sat beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. This isn't just about the money, is it, Isabel? It's about reclaiming your worth, your voice. Isabel nodded, tears welling up again. It's about showing Vivian that kindness isn't weakness, that true worth isn't measured in francs. The quiet strength in her voice, born of exhaustion but tempered with newfound resilience, surprised even her. Silas added, "And it's about the family you're building, the family you deserve." His words, a quiet affirmation of their shared journey and burgeoning affection, hung in the air, a promise of a future filled with warmth and compassion, far removed from the icy heart of the Beaumont legacy. The fight continued, but in that moment, surrounded by the quiet strength of her allies, Isabel felt a flicker of hope rekindle within her weary soul. The battle wasn't over, but the path forward, though uncertain, felt less lonely. The courtroom's hushed silence felt heavier than the Parisian air outside. The judge's words, echoing in the cavernous space, hung suspended like shards of glass. The court finds in favor of partial redistribution of assets. A wave of relief, tinged with bitter disappointment, washed over Isabel. Partial victory. It wasn't the complete vindication she'd craved, but it was a crack in Vivian's impenetrable fortress. Anya's hand squeezed hers, a silent acknowledgement of the bittersweet triumph. Silas's gaze, unwavering in its support, offered a refuge amidst the swirling emotions. The weight of the legal battle, the emotional toll of public scrutiny, left Isabel drained but strangely resolute. Later, in the quiet sanctuary of Silas's elegant apartment, the champagne felt flat. The city lights, usually a spectacle of dazzling beauty, seemed muted, their brilliance dimmed by the lingering shadows of the courtroom drama. Isabel traced the rim of her glass, her eyes fixed on the swirling bubbles, reflecting the turmoil within. "It's not enough, Silas," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He sat beside her, his hand gently covering hers. "It's a significant step, Isabel, a foundation for what's next." His voice held a comforting warmth that pierced the chill of her despair. Anya, ever the pragmatist, added, "We can appeal, but for now, focus on the immediate impact. This gives you the resources to support the other branches of your family, to begin to heal the wounds that Vivian's cruelty inflicted." Isabel looked at them, at the unwavering support in their eyes, a warmth that contrasted sharply with the coldness she'd experienced for so long. The battle had left scars, but it had also forged a bond stronger than blood. She had found kinship in unexpected places, a newfound family founded on loyalty, compassion, and a shared understanding of justice. The fight for her inheritance was far from over, but the fight for her own worth was won. A quiet smile finally graced her lips, a smile born not of wealth, but of resilience and love. The scent of old paper and leather hung heavy in the air of Isabel's small, rented apartment. Sunlight, slanting through the dusty window, illuminated motes of dust dancing in the silence. She reread the judge's decree, the words blurring through her tears. Partial victory felt like a cruel joke. "Anya's right," Silas's voice, gentle as a summer breeze, broke the silence. He stood in the doorway, a steaming mug in his hand. "You have leverage now, resources to help those the Beaumonts wronged." Isabel looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "But it's not justice, Silas. It's a compromise." The bitterness in her voice was palpable. The champagne from last night still clung to her palate, a sour reminder of the half-celebration. Silas approached, placing the mug on her desk. The warmth of the ceramic contrasted with the chill in the room. "Justice is a long road, Isabel. This is a step, a crucial one. You can use this to rebuild, to create your own justice. Think of the others, the forgotten branches of the family. They deserve something." His words resonated, a gentle push towards action. She thought of the faded photographs, the whispered stories of hardship and betrayal. The weight of their suffering, a burden she now shared, fueled a new determination. The fight for inheritance had been about more than money. It was about reclaiming a family's dignity. The city lights outside, now bathed in the twilight glow, no longer seemed muted. They shone with a renewed promise. This was not the end, but a beginning. The battle for justice may have been partially won, but the fight for reconciliation had just begun. The taste of champagne finally became something other than bitter. It was a prelude to the sweet taste of what was yet to come. The aftermath wasn't a triumphant parade. It was a quiet settling, a sifting of the dust after a storm. Isabel, sitting at her new oak desk, a stark contrast to the rented apartment, sipped lukewarm tea, the china delicate in her hands. The city sprawled before her, a glittering tapestry of lights, but the celebratory glow felt distant, muted. Anya's celebratory call still echoed faintly, tinged with a professional restraint that hid her own relief. Silas entered, the scent of rain clinging to his coat. He carried a thick folder, embossed with the Beaumont crest, a symbol that now felt more like a burden than a legacy. "The list is complete," he said, his voice low, a comforting counterpoint to the city's hum. He placed the folder on her desk, the leather cool against the polished wood. The collateral damage, the overlooked branches of the family. Their stories are heartbreaking. Isabel traced the crest with a fingertip, a bittersweet smile touching her lips. "They're not collateral, Silas. They are family." Her voice, though quiet, held a newfound strength, born from the battle fought and partially won. The partial victory felt like a seed, capable of blossoming into something significant. "This isn't just about money, is it?" Silas asked softly, his gaze meeting hers. The weight of the shared journey, the unspoken understanding, hung between them, heavy and comforting. "No," Isabel replied, her gaze lingering on the city lights. "It's about repairing the damage, about acknowledging the hurt, the betrayal that spanned generations. It's about rebuilding a family, not just an inheritance." She picked up the folder, her fingers lingering on its smooth surface. A profound sense of responsibility settled upon her, both daunting and exhilarating. The fight had just begun. The true battle was not in the courtroom but in the hearts of those she sought to heal. The scent of rain, now mingled with the aroma of tea, somehow felt like a fresh start. The city lights twinkled, reflecting not just the opulence of the Beaumont legacy, but the quiet glow of justice found, a beacon of hope for a family slowly mending its fractured bonds. The city shimmered below, a million tiny lights reflecting in the polished glass of Isabel's penthouse. The air, thick with the scent of expensive lilies and impending rain, mirrored the turbulent emotions churning within her. The court's decision, a bittersweet victory, hung heavy in the silence. Anya's words echoed in her mind. "It's a start, Isabel, a significant one. But a start to what?" Silas entered, his presence a quiet anchor in the storm. He carried a worn leather-bound book, its pages yellowed with age, the family's ancestral ledger. "I found this tucked away in the archives," he said softly, his voice a low rumble that soothed her frayed nerves. "It details the original inheritance, before everything went wrong." Isabel traced a finger along the embossed cover, the cool leather a stark contrast to the warmth of his hand as he gently placed it on hers. "Show me," she whispered, her voice hoarse with unshed tears. The ledger chronicled generations of Beaumonts, their triumphs and failures, their joys and sorrows, all meticulously documented. Isabel felt a connection to these long-forgotten relatives, a kinship forged not in blood alone but in shared experience. The illegitimately born branch, their names previously erased, were now etched onto the pages, their existence validated. "They were people, Silas," she murmured, her eyes glistening. "Not just footnotes in a cruel family history." He nodded, his gaze filled with empathy. "And their story deserves to be heard." He pointed to a faded entry, a record of a generous bequest earmarked for the illegitimate branch cruelly withheld. "This proves it, Isabel. Vivian's claim of legitimate succession was based on a deliberate lie." A wave of anger, potent and raw, washed over her. But beneath the anger, a quiet hope bloomed. She felt a profound sense of responsibility, not just to reclaim a lost inheritance, but to rebuild a broken family, to restore a truth lost to generations of silence. The city lights twinkled, a silent witness to this quiet revolution of truth and reconciliation. The scent of lilies faded, replaced by the sharp, clean scent of rain, a cleansing symbol of a new beginning. The fight wasn't over, but it felt different now, infused with purpose, with hope, and with the undeniable power of a truth finally revealed. The penthouse hummed with a quiet energy, the city lights a blurry backdrop to Isabel's internal turmoil. The rain, a relentless percussion against the glass, mirrored the relentless questions in her heart. Silas, ever observant, watched her, his silence a comforting presence. He poured 2 glasses of aged brandy, the amber liquid catching the light like captured sunset. "The ledger, it changes everything," Isabel whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm's roar. She swirled the brandy, the warmth spreading through her chilled hands. "It confirms the injustice," Silas agreed, his gaze meeting hers. "But it also reveals something else, a depth of feeling, a yearning for connection that transcends the bitterness." He gestured towards a faded inscription, detailing a small, almost hidden bequest to the disinherited branch, a testament to a love that had persisted despite the cruelty. Isabel's breath hitched. This wasn't just about money. It was about a legacy of unspoken love, a history buried under layers of lies and manipulation. She saw, in that faint inscription, a reflection of her own yearning for connection, for a family that wasn't defined by wealth but by genuine affection. Tears welled in her eyes, a mixture of sorrow and a newfound understanding. "Vivian, she knew," Isabel murmured, the realization a heavy weight in her chest. "She knew about this bequest all along." Silas nodded gravely. The weight of her actions. It must be crushing her now. The silence that followed hung thick and heavy, broken only by the rhythmic drumming of the rain. The weight of generations of silence, of carefully constructed lies, seemed to press down on them both. But in that shared silence, a different kind of connection bloomed, a silent understanding, a shared empathy, a quiet acknowledgement of the complexities of human nature. Isabel looked at Silas, a faint smile touching her lips. The fight was far from over, but tonight, amidst the storm, they found a solace in their shared journey towards truth. The courtroom was a stifling cage of polished wood and hushed whispers. Isabel, perched on the edge of the witness stand, felt the weight of expectation pressing down. The scent of old paper and expensive perfume hung heavy in the air, a suffocating blend of legal formality and simmering emotions. Anya, her lawyer, a beacon of calm amidst the storm, offered a reassuring smile. The judge's gavel, a symbol of authority, felt like a hammer against Isabel's heart. Vivian, in a stark contrast to her usual flamboyant attire, appeared subdued, her usual sharp features softened by a weariness that spoke volumes. Her gaze, usually filled with disdain, now held a flicker of something else. Fear, perhaps, or regret. Isabel couldn't decipher it. "Ms. Beaumont," Anya began, her voice strong and clear, cutting through the tension. "Can you describe the emotional impact of discovering the hidden letter?" Isabel inhaled deeply, the air catching in her throat. The memories flooded back, the sting of Vivian's cruelty, the gnawing sense of injustice, the thrill of discovery, the crushing weight of doubt. "It felt like uncovering a buried truth," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "A truth that had been deliberately hidden. A truth that redefined everything I thought I knew about my family, about myself." Tears pricked at her eyes, but she blinked them back, her resolve hardening. The letter wasn't just about money. It was about love, about a love that had been denied, suppressed, erased. It was a testament to resilience in the face of unimaginable cruelty. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the courtroom, landing on Vivian's face. And it was a reflection of my own struggle, my own yearning to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be loved. The silence that followed was thick, pregnant with unspoken emotions. Even the rhythmic tick of the clock seemed to amplify the intensity of the moment. Isabel felt a surge of strength, a sense of liberation in finally voicing her pain, her truth. The weight of years lifted slightly, replaced by a quiet determination. The battle wasn't over, but in that moment, under the scrutinizing gaze of the courtroom, Isabel felt a powerful sense of closure beginning to bloom. The fight for justice had become a fight for her own self-worth, and she was ready to face whatever came next. The judge's gavel fell, a sharp crack in the suffocating silence. The verdict, a hushed whisper that rippled through the courtroom, felt both monumental and inadequate. Isabel, her hand clasped tightly in Anya's, felt a wave of dizziness. Partial victory, not the complete exoneration she'd craved, but a significant shift in the balance of power. The weight of years of injustice seemed to lift slightly, replaced by a complex mixture of relief and disappointment. Outside, the city roared, a stark contrast to the courtroom's hushed intensity. The crisp autumn air, tinged with the scent of rain and exhaust fumes, did little to soothe the turmoil within her. Silas's arm, a comforting weight around her shoulders, offered a tangible sense of support. "It's not everything we hoped for, Isabel," he said, his voice low and steady, a reassuring anchor in the storm. "No," she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "But it's enough to start rebuilding." She looked at Anya, her lawyer's face etched with a mixture of exhaustion and quiet satisfaction. "Thank you," Isabel whispered, the gratitude brimming over. The following weeks were a blur of activity, a whirlwind of legal paperwork and family negotiations. Isabel, armed with the court's decision and a renewed sense of purpose, moved swiftly. She established a foundation to support the long-neglected members of her extended family, ensuring they received their fair share of the inheritance. The act of giving, of repairing the damage of past injustices, felt profoundly healing. A hesitant encounter with Vivian, in a quiet corner of the family's once opulent estate, now stripped bare of much of its ostentation, revealed unexpected depths. Vivian, frail and humbled, spoke not of remorse, but of regret, a quiet acknowledgement of the harm she had caused, a flicker of understanding in her weary eyes. It was not forgiveness, not yet, but a fragile beginning. Isabel, seeing the fragility in her aunt's composure, extended a hand, not in reconciliation, but in the simple gesture of shared humanity. The touch held weight and gravity more significant than words. The epilogue was not a fairy tale, but a quiet symphony of resilience. Isabel, empowered by her journey, dedicated her life to philanthropic endeavors, creating a legacy not of wealth alone, but of compassion and justice. Silas, his initial hesitation overcome, became her steadfast partner, their relationship deepening with time. Anya, fulfilled by her work, found contentment in knowing she had fought for what was right. The Beaumont family, forever changed, began to heal, their story a testament to the enduring power of human connection and the transformative potential of acknowledging and repairing past wrongs.